are back. Good morning and good evening to everyone around the world. Welcome back to another episode of the Puck Drop Podcast, brought to you by Caffrey. Every season is a Caffrey season, and especially this Monday morning where we had our Super Bowl Monday here in South Korea. The game finished just an hour ago, and what a game it was. Feels like it's been a while since we've sat here in front of the mic. We missed a week last week due to some unforeseen circumstances, but it worked out well. The NHL had their All-Star break, and we had a little break of our own. But I missed you, Randy. It's good to be back, bud. And what a day to record, too. Like I mentioned, Super Bowl Monday this morning. The Caffrey's flowing. Had a couple of Caesars to go with them. And I'm absolutely buzzing. There's actually a holiday today in Seoul, so didn't have to go to my regular job. Perfect time to do some hockey podcasting. But before we talk about the NHL, let's talk about this Super Bowl game. Congratulations to the Chiefs. Wicked game to watch. I think it was only the second overtime Super Bowl ever. First half started out a bit slow unless you're a big fan of defense, but the second half did not disappoint. A lot of scoring, a lot of key plays, I guess you could say. A kick that pretty much costed the 49ers a game. Went to overtime, like I mentioned, and the Chiefs won it in the dying seconds of overtime. A whole lot to talk about there. I'm not going to dive into it. This is a hockey podcast, not a football podcast, but great game to watch for all those who did. And man, the Super Bowl is just one of the funnest events to bet on, especially. There's so many random props, and now they threw in a lot of Taylor Swift props, and whether Kelsey's going to propose, whatever it is, you could bet on the craziest shit for the Super Bowl, and it just makes watching that much more fun. 2 years in a row, there was purple Gatorade. 2 years in a row, I lost that bet. Regardless, never been a big Chiefs fan, but Mahomes keeps winning and keeps making me some money. It's hard to bet on against that guy, I should say. What else is worth mentioning? Usher did the Super Bowl halftime show, and it was alright. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't one of the best ever. It was just solid. I honestly don't know many Usher songs. I think everybody knows Yeah, and that's pretty much all I can name off the top of my head. But anyway, solid performance. He came out on rollerblades. Did not have that on my betting slip. I don't know who did. One of the tougher scenes, actually, but kind of funny. I don't know if this player came back to the game. I hope he did, but a 49ers player got injured by just running on the field. He's on the sidelines. I think he was a defensive player. So he's on the sidelines waiting for his chance to go out there. He's, bouncing around. He's getting all excited. And then when it's his time to run on the field, he takes a couple of steps forward and, twists his ankle and goes down. That must suck, man. You wait your whole life to play in the Super Bowl. Again, I don't know. I can't tell you his name. I don't know if it's his first Super Bowl game, but what a shitty way to go down. And I hope for his sake he came back and actually got to play some snaps in the game. But that was kind of funny to watch. But anyway, with the Super Bowl finished, all there's left is NHL and NBA, and of course all our focus is going to be on the NHL. The NBA actually had their trade deadline this week, and it was pretty boring, pretty anticlimactic. So I hope to God the NHL trade deadline, which is coming in a couple weeks, is a lot more exciting than what we saw in the NBA. But anyway, let's get started here. Let's dive into what we missed in the last 2 weeks around the NHL. And the last time I left you beautiful puckers was right before the All-Star weekend. So let's just dive into All-Star break and talk about the game, the festivities, everything that happened. Going into this weekend, everyone knew that fans and players alike have lost a lot of interest in the All-Star game for fair enough reason. Last year's All-Star game and All-Star weekend was probably one of the worst we've had in a long time. It happened in Florida. The events weren't exciting. The players made a joke out of a lot of the events. The game wasn't really fun. There was no, draft leading up to it. So this year they had to really revamp the entire All-Star weekend, and they did. It took place in Vegas. They brought back the NHL All-Star break draft and included 4 celebrity guests. There were 4 Canadian celebrities: Tate McRae, Will Arnett, Michael Bublé, and Justin Bieber, each of them pairing up with an NHL All-Star captain in Quinn Hughes, Connor McDavid, Nathan MacKinnon, and Austin Matthews. I'm sure you could guess which celebrity was with Matthews, obviously Bieber. But anyway, the draft itself wasn't extremely exciting, but wasn't terrible. There were some, fun hot mics, whatnot. A lot of players, drafting players on their own team. Matthews filled his team with Leafs. Quinn Hughes filled his team with Canucks. McKinnon drafted his buddy Sidney Crosby, who unfortunately could not make the All-Star draft. Now, Sid took a lot of heat from people because he was seen on an outdoor rink in Montana, skating around, shooting pucks by himself while the All-Star draft was taking place. Whoever's giving him heat, just fuck right off, alright? It's Sidney Crosby. He's done so much for the league. He's done so much for his own franchise. 3-time Stanley Cup winner, 2-time Olympic gold medalist. This guy has done so much, and he can do whatever the hell he wants. So stop giving him shit. Let him do his thing. Obviously, he didn't. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say obviously. I don't know for a fact, but I'm sure he didn't skip the All-Star draft just to skate around in Montana. I'm sure he had other shit going on that day, and he just happened to, set aside a couple of hours to get a skate in. He is one of the best players of all time for a reason. The guy loves, eats, sleeps, and breathes hockey. Anyway, he missed the draft. Not a big deal. Move on. Stop giving the guy shit. Now, after the draft was finished, a lot of the celebrity captains took to the podium to address the media about how they felt about their team and their draft picks. And the best part of All-Star Weekend, in my opinion, was Michael Bublé and his post-draft conference, I guess you can call it, and him admitting that he took a few too many mushrooms. I thought that was absolutely hilarious. I didn't know much about Bublé. I didn't know he was a big hockey fan until he was on the Spittin' Chicklets podcast a couple weeks ago. Gained a lot of respect for him then, of just how much he knows about hockey and how much he loves the sport. And then after this, just gained so much more respect for him. The guy's hilarious. The fact that he can just openly say he's, on mushrooms. I was actually talking to my buddies about that. I don't understand how celebrities can just do that and not get in trouble. It's clearly an illegal substance. And it's not just him. Like Snoop Dogg all the time talks about how he's smoking dope. I know it's pretty much legal everywhere now, but back when it wasn't legal, he could just openly, smoke dope wherever he wants. I actually went to a concert of his, and he just pulled up with a massive blunt on the stage, started smoking dope, and then me and my buddies, we lit our little joints in the crowd, and immediately security, confiscated our weed. And fuck, man, look at the guy's 10 feet away from me smoking dope. Why can't I? Of course, I'm not Snoop Dogg, but I don't know. I find it funny how celebrities are just untouchable when it comes to doing certain drugs. But anyway, Bublé, hilarious for doing what he did. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna drop his interview real quick because for those who haven't heard it, you absolutely should.
My buddy told me this is just a microdose of mushrooms, and he was lying. So I'll be honest, I thought I was in Blades of Glory for most of the time that I was out there until it sort of settled down, and then I realized, holy shit, I am at the NHL All-Star Game.
It just occurs to me that through all the incredible songs that you've done over the years, and all the hearts of women that you've won over around the world, with all that talk about fantasy hockey, you lost them all in one sentence. It all just evaporated. Years of building it up, and it just gone.
Yeah, the mushroom talk lost me all of my contracts.
Well, the mushroom talk definitely lost you a lot of income.
Yeah.
Hilarious stuff. Mad credit to Bublé. He's slipped into my top 20 celebrities that I would love to do mushrooms with. Now, let's move on to the next day of festivities, which was the skills competition. And like I mentioned earlier, it was a lot better than previous years. They brought it back to actual skill instead of, players just kind of making a joke out of it. Last year, there was a bunch of players just trying to be funny, coming out in ridiculous costumes, doing ridiculous things. Whereas this year, they actually showcased their skill. They actually tried hard to win the competition. Everyone except for the scoring leader in Nikita Kucherov, who is obviously one of the best players in the NHL, but he made a complete mockery of the skills competition. Not a great look for the NHL. I'm sure he's not going to get disciplined for it. He passed up winning $1 million, not like it's much to him. But anyway, throughout every event, Nikita Kucherov was clearly giving absolutely zero effort. He even got booed for it by the fans in Toronto, gave them a little wave, clearly didn't give a shit about anything about the All-Star game. But it is what it is. The rest of the 12 participants did seem to care enough to put on a solid show, and we had the classic events like fastest skater, hardest shot, accuracy contest. It was quite entertaining. Like I said, one of my favorite skills competitions in quite some time. McDavid was actually consulted to give some ideas on how they could improve this competition, and I guess it was partly his idea, or maybe completely his idea, to put a $1 million incentive in the skills competition, and whichever player racks up the most points by finishing near the top in each event wins the money. And of course, Connor McDavid himself won the $1 million prize. One thing worth noting before we move on, in the accuracy contest, Leon Draisaitl struggled, and it's kind of weird for a guy that is so good at picking corners, especially with terrible angle one-timers on the power play. He could not hit the 4 targets, and it got to the point where it was hard to watch. They got to at least let the guy, give up at a certain point. He was clearly out of the race, but they just had him keep going and keep trying, and a lot of his shots were right in the middle of the net. I don't get it. I'm not at all taking anything away from him because he's one of the best players in the world and even one of the best shooters in the world. But it was very strange that he could not hit the targets. It was hard to watch. I'm sure he wanted to just get the hell out of there. But anyway, again, great All-Star event, great skills competition. And then the following day, we had our actual All-Star games. Not anything amazing, but again, better than previous years. Again, there was an incentive. The winning team won $1 million. So there was still no defense, high scoring games. It was 3-on-3, of course, but again, better hockey, better plays, most guys showing a decent amount of effort. So it was entertaining for the fans watching on TV, fans in the stadium. I liked it. Good job. Kudos to the NHL for improving on something that was really, really lacking entertainment in previous years. Team Matthews ended up taking home the $1 million grand prize, and seeing as it was in Toronto, I guess you can call it the home team won, and the fans were happy, but the best part was David Pastrnak throwing some shade at the Leafs and the Leaf fans, saying after the whole tournament, good for them, they needed some wins, and they got one. That was pretty funny. Clearly chirping Leaf fans and all the Leaf players that were on that winning team. Alright, and now before we move away from All-Star Weekend and get into the action on the ice, we did get one major announcement, and it is some incredible news for us hockey fans, something that we've been waiting for a long time. And that is that the NHL players will be allowed to compete in the 2026 Winter Olympics, which is awesome news. We have not had NHL players in the Olympics since Sochi in 2014. Which was just absolutely brutal luck because I moved here in South Korea in 2017 and I actually attended the Olympics in Pyeongchang, the first Olympics in a long time where there were no NHLers, so it was a lot less exciting to watch Team Canada lose to the Czech Republic. But anyway, great news there. And then, on top of that, they also announced that next year the NHL is going to hold their own best on best tournament consisting of 4 teams, Canada, USA, Finland, and Sweden, which is awesome. Now, of course, a lot of people are saying, is it best on best without Russia? One of the best teams. Right now, the leading scorer, Nikita Kucherov, is from Russia. It's not perfect. Of course, it's not perfect, but considering the circumstances, things going on in Russia, it's better than nothing. I'm very, very happy with this news. Hopefully down the road, whether it be in the next Olympics or, the next World Cup, or in 5 years from now at the 2030 Olympics, we'll finally get Russia and all the best teams in the world in the same tournament. But for now, great news. I'm so excited for next year. So on that note, there's not going to be an All-Star weekend for another 2 years, right? Because next year, this best on best tournament and the Olympics the following year. Of course, much better news than on All-Star Weekend. Despite them doing good this time around, we want best on best, and we got it for the next 2 years. Very, very exciting news. Good job, Gary Bettman. Alright, now it's time to jump into the on-ice action. And seeing as it's been 2 weeks since we've recorded, it's our only 2-week span, I guess, since we started this podcast back at the beginning of the season, we gotta talk about a lot of stuff, so maybe it's better we do it chronologically. So let's start with some quick news that happened right before the All-Star weekend. And that is 2 pretty big trades. I guess you can call them blockbuster trades. Let's start with the bigger of the 2, the one that happened first on January 31st, and that was the Vancouver Canucks acquiring Elias Lindholm from the Calgary Flames. In return, the Flames got a pretty big haul, including Andrei Kuzmenko and 2 prospects, one of which I honestly don't want to butcher his name, but 2 prospects both drafted in the 3rd round by the Vancouver Canucks, as well as a 2024 first round pick and a conditional 4th round pick. Now, that condition is as follows. The 4th round pick will become a 3rd round pick if Vancouver makes it to the conference finals. If the pick, however, remains a 4th rounder, then Calgary will receive the better of the 2 picks that Vancouver currently owns, which is Vancouver and New Jersey's 4th rounders. So, likely a 4th round pick, possibly a 3rd round pick. Regardless, a big haul for Elias Lindholm, who we talked about a couple weeks ago, was clearly the best center on the trade market, and Jim Rutherford wasted no time to acquire this player. It's about a month or more than a month before the trade deadline. He's been known to do that, not wait until the last minute. He went out and got his centerman, which makes sense. He wants the guy to have more reps with his team before playoffs. We talked so much about Lindholm before, so you guys all know who he is. Very great player, reliable on both sides of the ice, and has put up 40 goals in the past, so he can do pretty much everything. He can play in the middle, he can play on the wing. great pickup for Vancouver. But let's talk about the players that Calgary got. Now, of course, that is a massive haul. Like we mentioned, two draft picks, two prospects, and Andrei Kuzmenko, who's been struggling this year, but we know has the potential and the skill because last year, like we mentioned before, put up over 70 points. And you know what? His first few games in Calgary, he did not disappoint, scoring a goal in both of his first two games, showing his new franchise and his new fan base that he's still got some wicked talent and just needed a change of scenery. So with that in mind, Kuzmenko is going to be a Flame for the next 2 years at 5.5 mil. They also got a first round pick. They got a couple prospects, a potential fourth round pick, all for Elijah Lindholm, who was on an expiring contract and likely would not have re-signed in Calgary. So I think it is a great deal for both sides. Of course, Vancouver got the player they need. They're looking for a deep playoff push. Lindholm's a great piece for that, and Calgary got great pieces for the future. And who knows if Andrei Kuzmenko can play like he did last year? Maybe he'll sign an extension next year and stay in Calgary for a long time. And you know what else is great about this? So far, at least, there's only been 3 games with Andrei Kuzmenko in Calgary, but he's kind of helping Jonathan Huberdeau find his game. Huberdeau's had a great 3 games, putting up 5 points in his last 3 games. So not only is a change of scenery for Kuzmenko good, but honestly, a new line mate for Huberdeau could absolutely turn his game around. We know what he's capable of. He put up over 100 points in Florida just a couple years back, so this might be a franchise-altering move for the Flames if it helps turn Huberdeau's game around, because of course that's looking like one of the worst contracts in the league, and they have them locked in for the next 7 years. Doubt they'll be able to move him, so all they can hope is that he finds his game and starts playing a lot better. Now, as a Habs fan, this trade was great because we saw how much a center can bring in on this trade market. And then, not too long, a couple days later, Montreal Canadiens traded their top trade bait piece in Sean Monahan to the Winnipeg Jets for a first round pick and a conditional third round pick. Now, that conditional third is only if the Winnipeg Jets win the Stanley Cup this year. So, if the Jets win the Cup this year, the Habs get a first round and a third round pick. Very unlikely, so for now, let's just call it a first round pick. Now, a lot of people online are saying that that was an overpayment by the Winnipeg Jets, and I, for one, disagree. First thing I was thinking when this trade happened, part of me wishes the Montreal Canadiens waited a bit. If they waited closer to the deadline, and we talked about this on previous episodes, that Sean Monahan, after Lindholm gets traded, is the highest or the best center on the trade market. And considering his very, very low cap hit, and the fact that he's been playing great with subpar line mates, I think on deadline day, a lot of teams would be calling the Montreal Canadiens for this guy, and they could have some sort of bidding war and get a bit more than a first round pick. Now, on the other hand, considering the fact that Sean Monahan has been quite injury prone in the last couple of years, I like the fact that we did not risk it. Kent Hughes says, I can get a first round pick right now. Let's do it. Let's pull the trigger. So he did, and I like it. Now, I like it for the Jets too, of course. Sean Monahan is a great player. He's very responsible. He's no liability on either side of the ice. He's great at the faceoff dot. Montreal Canadiens are actually one of the best teams at the faceoff dot, largely due to Sean Monahan. And that is such an important statistic. I think it's very undervalued, at least by analytics or fans. I'm sure coaches know how important that is. So Sean Monahan adding that to the team, he can slot in as a great second line or even third line center for the Winnipeg Jets. So without a doubt, great acquisition from both sides, but what makes it a bit juicier for the Montreal Canadiens is the fact that they received a first round pick from the Calgary Flames just to take on Sean Monahan's contract. And then a couple of years later, they were able to flip him for a first round pick. So great job there by Kent Hughes. I think it's a great trade by Kevin Cheveldayoff, of course. He's going to help the Winnipeg Jets make a deep playoff run, a team that's already been playing great, but don't want to get ahead of myself. They actually are on a bit of a skid right now. Lost 3 in a row going into the All-Star break, and then lost 2 more games coming out of the All-Star break. Thankfully, they did end their 5-game losing streak just the other day. But let's not jump ahead too far because we got another big piece of news during the All-Star break, and that is the LA Kings firing head coach Todd McLellan. Now, this was a bit of a surprise for a lot of people, and in fact, the first quarter through the season, a lot of people had Todd McLellan as a favorite for the Jack Adams Trophy. The LA Kings were playing great. They had some of the best defensive numbers, and then, as you all know, as we've talked about it in the past couple weeks, they completely fell apart. Not only did they slip down the standings with a bunch of losses, but their defensive game took a big hit. A lot of their analytics went from first, second to the league to dead last, 32nd. Things like high danger scoring chances, and of course the play of goaltender Cam Talbot, who was playing incredible at the start of the year. And it's not really his fault. He hasn't, fallen off a cliff per se, but things needed a change in that locker room. There's no doubt Todd McClellan is still one of the best coaches in the NHL, but the way he was handling certain players' time on ice and not getting the most out of guys like Pierre-Luc Dubois, although it seems a lot of coaches are having problems doing that. I don't know, it just seemed like an utter, complete collapse from how well they were playing at the start of the year to what it looked like just before the All-Star break. So Rob Blake felt the need to replace Todd McClellan with Jim Hiller, who was the assistant coach and now got promoted to interim head coach. Very curious to see how this will play out for the Kings. I mentioned before, a lot of the times, even if it's not the coach's fault, just changing that bench boss can absolutely light a fire under the players' asses and change the whole dynamic of the team. Look at the Edmonton Oilers. It was not Jay Woodcroft's fault for their slow start to the season, goaltending trouble, defensive trouble, whatever it may be. They replaced their coach with Chris Knobloch, and then they went on an incredible run. And of course, that wasn't the first time. It's happened several times before. So I'm sure the LA Kings are hoping to catch some of that same magic that the Oilers caught earlier this season. Now, entering week 18, coming out of the All-Star break, there were a few things to keep your eye on, one of which was the Edmonton Oilers' 16-game winning streak. Only one more needed to tie that all-time record by the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I mentioned before the All-Star break that the break came at the absolute worst time for the Edmonton Oilers. They were buzzing. You don't want to have to take a 5 or 6 day break when you're by far the hottest team in the NHL. And they came out of the break playing the Vegas Golden Knights, and unfortunately, they could not win that 17th straight game to tie the record. Adin Hill played incredible for the Vegas Golden Knights. Aside from a 2-0 in which Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid came down, which is pretty much impossible to stop, Adin Hill shut everything else out for the Vegas Golden Knights, who ended up winning that game 3-1, ending the Oilers' incredible run. Would have loved to see them tie the record, but so be it. It was still an amazing couple of weeks for the Edmonton Oilers. And worth mentioning, although it was our trivia question on our last episode, Sam Gagner is the only player in NHL history to be a part of 2 16-game winning streaks. He did it a couple years back with the Columbus Blue Jackets, and he did it again this year with the Edmonton Oilers. Now, despite bouncing back and winning against the Anaheim Ducks, the Oilers faced off against a team that you can now call their rivals in the LA Kings and dropped that game 4-0. The Oilers and the Kings played each other the last 2 years in the first round of the playoffs, both of them going to 7 games. And I wouldn't be surprised if these two teams faced off again this year in the playoffs. So this is a team that the Oilers definitely want to beat. You could visibly see McDavid's frustration in this game as he got off the ice and broke his stick on the edge of the bench. He was visibly upset, and after putting up only 1 goal against the Vegas Golden Knights and then getting shut out by the LA Kings, this is a bit of a tough road trip for the Edmonton Oilers. But of course, no need to push the panic button. They still sit in 3rd place in that Pacific Division. Now, looking over at the other streak, which was Nate McKinnon's point streak, coming out of the All-Star break, he scored a highlight reel goal against New York Rangers where he almost went coast to coast, undressed a defenseman, and then sniped it on Jonathan Quick. But then, unfortunately, the very next night against the New Jersey Devils, Nathan McKinnon was held scoreless, ending his 15-game point streak. So as much as the players had fun at the All-Star break, it came at a terrible time for both Nathan McKinnon and the Edmonton Oilers. That same night, when both streaks were ended, the Calgary Flames faced off against the Boston Bruins, where, like I mentioned, Andrei Kuzmenko played his first game with his new team and scored a goal, but also in that game, Martin Pospisil got a 5-minute major and a game misconduct for punching, or maybe even cross-checking, Brad Marchand in the face. Now, funny enough, Brad Marchand was voted amongst players as the second most, the second most punchable face, I guess. The Athletic polled players asking, who's the player in the league whose face you most want to punch? Nick Cousins was voted number 1 and Brad Marchand number 2. So as much as fans and other players will thank Martin Pospisil for that, unfortunately, it's against the rules. He got kicked out of the game. But funny enough, he got rewarded a couple days later with a brand new contract with the Calgary Flames, as they signed him to a 2-year extension with a cap hit of $1 million per year. The night didn't end there in the NHL. Brendan Dillon over in Winnipeg got suspended for 3 games for hitting Noel Acciari of the Pittsburgh Penguins in the head. It was not a good hit, not nearly as bad as the Brendan Gallagher hit we talked about the other week, but it was a clear shot to the head as he skated by him, clipping him along the boards. Now, the next night saw an even more unfortunate incident when the Tampa Bay Lightning visited New York, Mikhail Sergachev's first game back in quite some time, as he's been out with an injury since December 20th, and in this first game back, he went awkwardly into the boards, and this was a pretty gross injury to watch. He fell on his leg awkwardly. You can clearly see his leg was broken. He fractured his left tibia and fibula, which required surgery the next day. Now, when this injury happened, you can clearly see Sergachev was very emotional. Like I said, he just came back from a long injury, and for this to happen, it's just very unfortunate. He was tearing up on the ice as he was getting stretchered off. He did give a thumbs up to the fans, but I feel for this kid. He ended up coming out with a pretty lengthy quote saying the following: "Oh man, why me? Why now? After all the games missed, coming back and getting injured again feels unfair. Feels terrible. Trying to stay calm and positive, but it's impossible. After doing everything right, I get this. The universe is unpredictable, I guess, and it has its own plans, but fuck the universe, man. I know I'll come back stronger, and I know I'll play better than before, but it's tough right now, and it's going to be tough tomorrow. We all fight our own battles, and this is mine. I'll win, always do." So clearly, for him to make a post like this, he's obviously not taking it very well. I don't know how anyone would. It really sucks. He's a young player. He's a great player. He's a big part of that Tampa Bay team, a core part of that team that won 2 cups and made 3 Stanley Cup finals in a row. It really sucks for him. I hope he recovers well. Right now, there's no timeline for his recovery, but like I said, he just had surgery, so I wouldn't be surprised if he's out for the rest of the regular season and maybe even the playoffs. Before this injury happened, Tampa was actually on the market looking for a D-man. So for them to take this hit as well, it's going to be interesting to see what Julien BriseBois does for this team as the trade deadline approaches. There's already a lot of controversy going on with the whole Steven Stamkos thing. The fact that he hasn't gotten extended means he might be playing his last year in Tampa. Who knows? I've mentioned before, this team is always dangerous come playoff time. Like I said, they've been through a dynasty in the past couple of years. You never know what these guys can do in the playoffs, with Andrei Vasilevsky being one of the best goalies in the world over the past 4 or 5 years. Guys like Kucherov playing at the top of his game. Hedman still a solid D-man. Braden Point, Stamkos, whatever it may be. This team is always dangerous, and if they go out and get some more D-men, unfortunately, to replace a guy like Sergachev, they might still be a very, very dangerous team come playoff time. Let's move over to the following night, where the Philadelphia Flyers continue to impress as they took down the Winnipeg Jets, but more importantly, or more impressively, I should say, in this game, Travis Konechny recorded a Gordie Howe hat trick in the first period of the game with only 4 minutes and 7 seconds of time on ice. Now, going into the season, and before the Flyers became this juggernaut we're seeing this season, Travis Konechny was a big name that was being thrown around for, one of the biggest trade pieces that the Flyers have. And clearly we can see this guy could bring in a haul. He's an incredible player. He's got over 27 goals, I believe, this season. And like we saw in this game, he could do everything else. He can dish it, he can hit, he can fight. He's pretty much the perfect representative of what a Flyer should be. So I wonder if the team is going to look to trade him now. They're looking at a playoff spot right now, so maybe they're going to be buyers at the deadline. I personally, if I was a fan, would still hope that the team sells, because as good as they've been playing, are they a Stanley Cup winning team? Doesn't look like it on paper, but they also didn't seem like they'd be a playoff team on paper, so what do I know? But with Konechny's value being as high as it was in the offseason, and now the fact that he's been playing incredible, the team's been playing incredible, and he's doing what he did this week, I think his value has gone way up. So now would be a great time for the Flyers to trade him. He's a 26-year-old with 2 years left on his contract, with a 5.5 mil cap hit for both those years, which is an incredible deal for a guy like him. And as usual, I made a mistake here. Randy's here to correct me. He's got 24 goals on the season. My bad. 24 goals, 46 points. Just a good old Canadian kid, as Don Cherry would say. A lot of teams would love to have this guy. So if they were to trade him, my guess honestly would be 2 first-round picks, or at least a first and a solid prospect. My reason for this, of course, he's a great player, can play on the top line of any team, but he's also not a rental. He's not on an expiring contract. Whatever team claims him could also make a push next year if for whatever reason this year they don't win the cup. But anyway, I'm curious to see what the Flyers do with this guy and what they do in general at the trade deadline. Also in the same night as Konechny's Gordie Howe hat trick, the Carolina Hurricanes put a beating on the Colorado Avalanche, with Martin Necas scoring a hat trick in the first period. It was actually his first career hat trick, and it was a natural hat trick, being the first 3 goals of the game. So great for him. But later in that game, we saw another very, very weird goal this year. We've already had a couple of extremely strange goals. Well, Sam Girard dumped the puck from center ice on net, and he actually went bar down and beat Kochetkov, who I guess was not ready for that dump in. Now let's continue to move on as we go day by day here through the NHL week. And Friday had a great moment with Marc-Andre Fleury receiving an incredible and well-deserved tribute as the Minnesota Wild hosted his former team, the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Wild and even the Penguins did a whole lot for Fleury in this game. They had his kids read the starting lineup in the Minnesota Wild dressing room. When he got on the ice, there was a 1,000 mark covered in flowers, of course, his nickname being the Flower, and him having played his 1,000th game earlier this season. Sidney Crosby also presented him a mural, I guess you can call it, before the game, just covered in pictures of Marc-Andre Fleury in Pittsburgh when he won a cup as the starting goalie and 2 more cups as the backup goalie. Real nice to see him and Crosby share that moment, and Crosby gave him a little French bonne chance mon ami, je t'aime, or whatever it was. Very cool to see. And then finally, the tribute on ice on the Jumbotron was also very nice. Honestly, I was getting emotional watching it. I can't imagine how he felt. He had a lot of his former teammates, coaches talk, and even his kids and his wife just thank him for being an amazing person, an amazing dad. His teammates, of course, thanking him for being an amazing player. He's 100% going to the Hall of Fame. I've said it many times. I don't even need to say it. Any hockey fan knows what this guy's been through. Back from the 03 draft, the first overall pick in one of the greatest, or probably the greatest, NHL drafts of all time. And to this day, you can argue he is still the best player ever from that draft class. And of course, part of this tribute was to congratulate Marc-Andre Fleury for officially passing Patrick Roy with the second most wins in NHL history. Now, moving over to Friday night, which had 2 pretty heated games. First, the Detroit Red Wings hosted the Vancouver Canucks, and although these are 2 teams that don't see each other much, things did get pretty fiery. Early on in the second period, Nikita Zadorov threw a hit to the head of Red Wings winger Lucas Raymond. Zadorov was later suspended 2 games for this hit to the head. And that, of course, sparked a whole lot of bad blood. Later in the period, Alex DeBrincat, a guy who doesn't usually drop the mitts, was seen scrapping with Ian Cole, although he didn't really throw many big blows. Good for him for dropping the mitts and standing up for one of his younger teammates. Credit to Ian Cole also for not punching DeBrincat while he was down, as DeBrincat fell to his knees kind of early on in the fight. Overall, though, a very eventful and exciting game, as the Red Wings scored 2 goals in the third period to send it to overtime, where in overtime defenseman Jake Wallman was actually given a penalty shot in which he scored and of course did his signature gritty walk-off dance, which I still don't love, but he can do whatever he wants. He won the game. The Washington Capitals, despite their recent struggles, having dropped 6 games in a row, they came into this night and played some great hockey against a solid Boston Bruins team, winning 3-0 on the road and only allowing 18 shots against. But most importantly, Alex Ovechkin set another milestone as he scored the empty netter to seal off the win. That was his 57th career empty netter, surpassing Wayne Gretzky for the most empty net goals in NHL history. Might not sound like a good stat, but a goal is a goal. Always nice having your name in the record book. Now let's talk some Toronto Maple Leafs. Rewind a couple of days, they came out of the All-Star break looking good. Their core 4 putting up goals, although their scoring depth has not been very helpful. Matthews still seems to be scoring every single game. They beat a strong team in the Dallas Stars by a score of 5-4, but then on Saturday night, they faced off against their divisional rivals and provincial rivals in the Ottawa Senators, and things got heated late. A pretty back and forth game saw the Senators leading 4-3 when in the dying seconds of the third period, Ridley Gregg gets a breakaway on the empty net and decides to take an absolute clapper to throw the loss in the face of the Leaf players and Leaf fans, and Morgan Rielly took exception to that, skating up to him and pulling a Dale Hunter, just cross-checking him in the face. And this has caused some awesome debate online. Fans all over the place saying that was a dirty move by Morgan Rielly, that was a dirty play by Ridley Gregg, why would he do that? Very divided fan base, and myself, I get both sides of it, and honestly, I feel for both sides. Ridley Gregg, it was a gutty move. You know, you already won the game. You could just slide the puck in for the insurance goal, but no, you decide to take a clapper. Hey, you know what, Leafs, if you don't like it, don't lose the game to a bottom-tier team in the Ottawa Senators. One way you could have avoided that was to not give up a breakaway with an empty net. Now, on the other hand, Ridley Gregg, you should 100% see that coming. What you did is definitely going to warrant an attack from the opposition. You added insult to injury, you salted the wound, you better expect someone to come after you. Now, when talking about Morgan Riley, do I like what he did? Yes and no. I like that he went after Ridley Gregg. I like that he showed some emotion and showed that, if you're going to be a gutty piece of shit, well, we're going to come after you. I would love that as a Leaf fan. Now, should he have cross-checked the guy in the face? Probably not. There's other ways to take exception. Drop the gloves. I don't even care if the game's done. Drop your gloves. Go after him like a regular hockey fight. Now, Leaf fans and Morgan Riley, you better expect a suspension, because I sure as hell do. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't get suspended, and deservingly so. You can't cross-check a guy in the face like that. So, I could see it from both sides. I understand why he did it. I think he shouldn't have done it, at least to that extent. He should have done something else. Ridley Gregg, you have all the right to do it, I guess. Probably shouldn't have done it. It's pretty gutty, but hey, you're that kind of player. You're a young, up-and-coming rat in the league. Good for you. Piss the other guys off. The next time these two teams play, it's going to get heated. Maybe that's exactly what the Sens want. All in all, it's great for hockey. It's great as a hockey fan. I love it. I hope we see more of it. But before we move on from this game, another little topic of discussion is young German phenom Tim Stützle and how he's becoming known as a diver around the league. And that is a pretty shitty look by the kid who's got so much talent. Right before the All-Star break, when the Ottawa Senators faced off against the Detroit Red Wings, Detroit head coach Derek Lalonde is seen doing the diving motion with his hands after Tim Stützle falls pretty easily and draws a tripping penalty. Well, again in this game, he goes down quite easily, and Sheldon Keefe does not love it. Calls him after the game the biggest diver in the NHL. And I gotta agree, and I honestly think it's hard for Sens fans or anyone to disagree. This guy goes down quite easily. Now, sure, you can say it's smart because he's drawing penalties, but there's a reason we have embellishment penalties. Nobody likes to see that. Nobody wants this game to turn into soccer. It's hockey. It's one of the toughest games in the world. We got to keep it that way. Don't go down unless you're actually tripped. Don't be a diving little bitch, all right? Again, he's a wicked player, so much skill. Would love to have him on my team, but if I were one of his teammates, I'd tell him, man, you got to cut that shit out because it's not a good look. Now, that's pretty much it for the big on-ice news topics from this week, but let's talk about some of the things that happened off the ice before we wrap this episode up. A couple of milestones I wasn't able to mention. Sidney Crosby passed Mark Recchi for 21st all-time in NHL goals when he scored his 578th goal this week. He now trails Yari Curry by 24 goals to move into 20th all-time in goals scored. Congratulations to Sidney Crosby on that, as he does not seem to be slowing down. And this one is a funny one. Urho Vakanainen of the Anaheim Ducks scored his first NHL goal 2 weeks ago. His NHL debut was 6 years ago, and he had his first NHL goal disallowed 3 times by video review before he scored his official first goal 2 weeks ago. So a bit of a tough start, I guess, to his career, but regardless, congratulations to him as he finally put one in the net and gets to take that puck home. He was a part of that Hampus-Lindholm trade that sent Lindholm from Anaheim to Boston. He went the other way. He was Boston's first round pick back in 2017, and he is now with the Anaheim Ducks. Quick note, Brad Marchand and Alex Pietrangelo are both at their 999th game played in the NHL, so these guys both better be ready this week for their Silver Stick 1,000-game milestone. Now, I mentioned the 2 big trades that happened last week. There have been a ton of trade rumors, a ton of players being put on the trade block, or speculation of players, teams receiving calls for certain players. It would be very hard for me to go through every single one of them. So instead, I'll just list off a couple of big names and talk about where they might end up. Last week, talked a lot about Jake Getzel, how I think it's a mistake if the Penguins trade him. Of course, I understand why they would be looking to trade him, but for Sidney Crosby's sake, I don't think that's very fair. Anyway, a whole bunch of teams would be interested in this guy, as he is a top-line scoring winger. He's been linked to a whole bunch of teams looking for a winger, and without a doubt, I think he can bring back a first-round pick for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Jacob Chychrun, who was on the trade block for what seemed like forever in Arizona, is now being talked about again, as Ottawa, clearly not making the playoffs this year, is looking to move him. He has not fit in well in their system. Although he is a great player, I think he will thrive elsewhere. Just did not work out in Ottawa. Ottawa Senator Vladimir Tarasenko also on the trade block. A lot of teams looking at him. He's been linked to the Edmonton Oilers, who look to continue to add to that stacked offensive lineup. The Calgary Flames are apparently taking calls for Noah Hannafin, Chris Tanev, and Jacob Markstrom. And if that is the case, Jacob Markstrom is probably one of the top trade chips on the trade market. Of course, we mentioned so many times on this podcast how many teams are in desperate need of goaltending. Well, Jacob Markstrom's having a great season, bouncing back after last year's, underwhelming season. A team like the Carolina Hurricanes or the LA Kings or the New Jersey Devils would all love to have a solid goaltender like Jacob Markstrom. Chris Tanev has been linked to his former team, the Vancouver Canucks. They already grabbed Elias Lindholm from the Calgary Flames. Well, apparently they're still in talks to bring back one of their great stay-at-home D-man in Chris Tanev. He's also linked, of course, to the Toronto Maple Leafs and has been for quite some time. There are rumors that the Toronto Maple Leafs are looking to acquire both Chris Tanev and Noah Hannafin from the Calgary Flames. Now, if they were to do that in one trade, I wonder what the return would be. It would have to be a pretty hefty load of players, first round picks, prospects, whatever. That would definitely be a blockbuster trade and something that the Leafs have wanted for quite some time. Marc-Andre Fleury's name is also being passed around. Of course, that would be completely up to him. He's likely in his last NHL season, and it depends if he wants to uproot his family and move to a new city again. Depending on where he would get traded, he might even be a backup goaltender. So it's up to him whether he thinks that's worth it or not. Maybe he wants another shot at a Stanley Cup. But it is absolutely up to him. Even if he didn't have a no-move clause, he's one of the guys that you got to talk to. You can't do him dirty considering what he's done for your franchise and what he's done for the league. We talked about it earlier. He's a legend of the game. You got to do right by him. Trevor Zegras, who was voted the most overrated player in the league by NHL players in that athletic poll, has been linked to the Montreal Canadiens. Now, this is an interesting one. The Canadiens are obviously a seller, considering they are nowhere near the playoffs and they've already moved their second line center. Why would they want to bring in a guy like Trevor Zegras? Well, of course, he's still very young, so he could be a part of that future. And, of course, his value is quite low relative to how it was after his rookie season. Now would be the time for the Montreal Canadiens to acquire him. He's good buddies with Cole Caulfield. I'm sure a lot of people who have followed the USA World Junior team or even the US National Development team know that they're good buddies. Maybe they'll have great chemistry on the ice together. This is a very risky trade for the Montreal Canadiens, and honestly, as a Habs fan, a lot of the risky trades they've made in the past did not work out. Guys like Jonathan Drouin, for example. But depending on what they would give up, I would love to see Zegras play with Cole Caulfield. But again, considering that the Montreal Canadiens and the Anaheim Ducks are in a similar position in terms of rebuilding and looking ahead into the future, I'm sure the Anaheim Ducks would want a prospect in return or a first-round pick. Now, we mentioned the Montreal Canadiens got Winnipeg's first-round pick for that Sean Monahan trade. Kent Hughes has done this several times in the past 3 years. He received a first-round pick from the New York Islanders for Alex Romanov and immediately flipped it to the Chicago Blackhawks for Kirby Dach. The following year, he received a first-round pick from the Florida Panthers for Ben Sherratt and flipped it for Alex Newhook at the draft. So maybe that first-round pick that they got from the Winnipeg Jets, he intends on flipping for a young prospect, maybe Trevor Zegras. One more name that I thought was pretty interesting, Riley Smith of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Apparently the Vegas Golden Knights are looking to reacquire him. He's been a Vegas Golden Knight since their inception. He won the cup with them last year, and for the first time in a while, he was moved to a different team in the Pittsburgh Penguins. Apparently he does not fit in well in that lineup, and the Golden Knights are in talks to bring him back. Now, this happened also before the break. The Pittsburgh Penguins signed Jesse Puljujarvi to a 2-year contract worth $800,000 AAV. Jesse Puljujarvi, who's been talked about for quite a few years now as, I guess, a bust, you can say. He was drafted 4th overall by the Edmonton Oilers back in 2016. A pretty high draft pick, especially considering the names that he got drafted ahead of. Matthew Tkachuk being one of them. Could you have imagined Matthew Tkachuk playing with Connor McDavid and Draisaitl? That would have been dangerous. But anyway, Puljujarvi has had a tough time breaking out in the NHL. He was traded last year by the Edmonton Oilers to the Carolina Hurricanes. He only played 17 games in Carolina and only amassed 2 assists, 0 goals. He did play 7 games in the playoffs, but again, no goals, only 1 assist. He played his first 3 games in Pittsburgh and has been held scoreless, so still not showing the potential that he showed back in Sweden before he was drafted by the Edmonton Oilers. I don't know much about this guy off the ice. Don't even know much about him on the ice. Seems like a great guy. I feel bad for him. It's never easy being a high draft pick that just hasn't played up to his expectations. I hope he is able to turn around. He's only 25 years old, so it's safe to say he does have a long career of hockey ahead of him. Who knows what could happen for the kid? Would love to see him turn it around. He's got a year and a half in Pittsburgh, so maybe he'll find his scoring touch with new line mates. Some other teams that may be able to sign some players or even trade for some players. The Philadelphia Flyers, Calgary Flames, and New Jersey Devils have been given cap relief for the players that they lost due to that Hockey Canada incident. This is a bit of a weird one. I don't want to say that the teams who had these players signed should get punished because of their involvement in what happened back in 2018. Would I say for sure that the teams or the GMs were not aware of their involvement? I kind of doubt that. From my understanding, players that enter the NHL Players Assistance Program still count against the cap. Now, they don't count against the maximum player roster, but their cap hit still counts. Now, I guess that's with the assumption that they will be returning at some point in the season. So I guess it's a different situation. But for them to come out and say that these teams have cap relief is pretty much guaranteeing that they're not coming back this year, which we already kind of knew. But a organization like the Ottawa Senators, who were clearly aware of Alex Formenton's involvement in all this, they chose not to sign him, not to bring him back. I think he was good enough to be on an NHL roster. He's a solid player, or at least he was when he played for the Sens. So should they get some sort of extra relief, or maybe get that draft pick back that they were stripped of earlier this year? I just think as a Sens fan, I would be pretty annoyed that they got punished for something that I personally don't think was as bad as other things that certain organizations have done, and they don't get any credit for not bringing back Alex Foreman into their lineup, who I'm sure they could have used, especially considering how they've been playing this season. They did the right thing by not signing this guy. These other teams, who again I assume knew about their involvement, went ahead and gave these players contracts or extensions or whatever it may be, and they don't get punished for it. They get cap relief. Again, touchy subject. I know I'm going to take a lot of backlash for this. I just think it is a very strange way the NHL handles this kind of situation. What would I suggest alternatively? I don't know. I just think these Sens got boned earlier this season, and I kind of think they're getting boned again. And speaking of the Player Assistance Program, Evgeny Kuznetsov and Patrick Laine both have entered the NHLPA Players Assistance Program, and they are the third and fourth player to do it so far this season. Earlier in the year, Valerie Nichushkin and Samuel Girard both entered the program as well. It's a good sign to see players not afraid to come out and ask for help and join this Player Assistance Program. It's there for a reason. But is it a tough sign to see so many players struggling with whatever they're struggling with and needing help doing it? It's not something we want to see. We definitely want these guys to recover whatever they're battling, whatever they're dealing with. We hope that they can recover, overcome it, and come back and play some great hockey that we all love to watch. But it's just, we don't want to see this trend increasing. More players struggling with anxiety or whatever it may be. Again, great that this program's there to help the players. I just hope we don't see too many players needing to enter this assistance program. All right, let's ramp it back up to a more positive note. I could hear my own tone getting a little too negative. The 2025 Winter Classic has been announced and will be held in Chicago on Wrigley Field against the St. Louis Blues. Now, a lot of people saw this coming. Of course, they want Connor Bedard to be the headline of the next Winter Classic. So no surprise there. Wrigley Field, always a great venue for these kind of events. That'll be fun to watch. And apparently, any day now, we're going to get some news about the Arizona Coyotes and their new arena situation. Whether that be in Phoenix, in Scottsdale, somewhere in Arizona, or whether the team relocates completely. Now, the Utah Jazz owner, Ryan Smith, no, not the former NHLer Ryan Smith, different Ryan Smith, has shown a strong interest in bringing an NHL team over to Salt Lake City. I think that'd be a great idea. They already have an arena for it. Clearly, things in Arizona have not been going as smoothly as expected, but we'll see. There's apparently an announcement coming any day now. It was supposed to be around Super Bowl weekend. Super Bowl already happened. Hopefully, in the next few days, we hear some more news. David Pagnotta, a reporter of the fourth period, and at the NHL Network, came out and said that he thinks there's going to be 36 NHL teams by the year 2030. I don't know if he's exaggerating. I don't know if he's just trying to make a point that the NHL is going to continue to grow. I think that's absolutely wild. But if there were, we've already heard of a bunch of locations that could potentially hold an NHL team. Utah or Salt Lake City being one of them, potentially Houston, potentially Quebec City. They might even try Atlanta again. Who knows? So whether the Arizona Coyotes relocate or whether the NHL continues to expand, just be prepared to see a lot more American cities and maybe one Canadian city have an NHL club in the future. All right, now here is a big news topic and something that relates to an issue I've been meaning to bring up for quite some time. It was announced that John Tavares is being audited by the CRA, the Canadian Revenue Agency, and in return, John Tavares is now suing the CRA over this $8 million tax bill that he was given because of his signing bonus. Now, this is some very big news and can be pivotal for a lot of pro athletes in Canada. Back in 2018, John Tavares signed a $77 million USD, by the way, contract to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs. In that contract, there was a $15.25 million signing bonus, which apparently, according to the US-Canada tax treaty, should be taxed at a much lower rate than the rest of his salary. Unfortunately, the CRA disagrees. Now, a lot of players in the NHL use this signing bonus loophole to structure their contracts so that they pay less taxes. The first year of Tavares' 7-year contract saw him receive $15.9 million, but only $650,000 of that was actual salary. The rest of it was signing bonus, again, in which he assumed would be taxed less. Well, it seems the CRA is catching on to this loophole that a lot of NHL players are trying to do, and so they believe that the entire compensation package should be treated as salary and not a signing bonus. So who knows how this is going to end between Tavares and the CRA. I'm sure it's going to be an ongoing battle for some time, but why do I think this is so important and why does it affect a lot of athletes in North America, especially in Canada? If the CRA is adding complications to players playing in Canada for these North American leagues, whether it be the NBA or the NHL, it is going to limit the amount of players that want to sign for Canadian teams. And that is already a major issue in the NHL. Players get taxed a bunch more in Canada, especially provinces like Quebec, relative to states with no income tax, such as Florida or Texas. And that puts these clubs at a major disadvantage. Of course, this hits home for me. I'm a Habs fan, and the Montreal Canadiens and Quebec have some of the worst income tax in North America. So why would a player want to sign in Montreal when they could sign down south in Texas or Florida and make way more money for that same valued contract? This happens, this always brings me back to Alex Radulov. The Habs signed Radulov out of the KHL. He came back, played 1 year in Montreal, and then Marc Bergevin and the Montreal Canadiens offered him a contract extension, and the Dallas Stars offered him the exact same contract. He decided to sign with Dallas because he makes way more money off the same valued contract because he doesn't get taxed. He gets zero income tax, whereas Quebec has the worst income tax in the National Hockey League. So that puts the Montreal Canadiens at a huge disadvantage. And it's not just the Montreal Canadiens. Like I mentioned, Canadian taxes in general are much worse. Toronto Maple Leafs and Ottawa Senators, being in Ontario, also have to pay much more taxes than most American teams. And of course, these no-state teams like Dallas Stars, Florida Panthers, Tampa Bay Lightning, I think Vegas is in there, I think Arizona's in there, I don't know. But it's just very unfair for these clubs that have to deal with this income tax. So what is the solution to this? Why not an adjusted salary cap that is done before taxes, before teams have to pay taxes or players have to pay taxes? That way, pre-tax, every single team has the same salary cap. If I'm explaining that properly, for example, the Montreal Canadiens can offer an $8 million contract to a player that the Dallas Stars can offer a $6 million contract. The player will still make the same amount of money no matter what city he plays in, and the salary cap is adjusted so that the teams can still offer the same amount of money, again, pre-tax, as every other team. I'm probably confusing the hell out of everybody listening. I hope people understand what I'm trying to say. So, the more the team gets taxed, for example, Quebec, let's say they have a 27% income tax, their salary cap should be 27% higher than a state or a team with no income tax. If Ontario has 23% income tax, their salary cap should be 23% higher. In the end, the players are all making the same amount of money, and the teams can all spend the same amount of money in a sense before tax. Now, I assume one reason why this hasn't happened yet is because now the owners of these teams in cities, in states, in provinces where they have to pay more tax are now getting screwed over. Well, that's where a revenue sharing system would come into place. They've done that to provide for a team like Arizona, who has not been profitable in however long. There's a revenue sharing system to keep all these teams afloat. Well, there should be some sort of system, revenue sharing, where the NHL or a bunch of owners together can help compensate for these owners that have to spend a lot more money to have an even, a fair salary cap ceiling. I hope people understand what I'm saying. This has been an issue for so long. The NHL brought in a salary cap to make it a fair league, to bring parity among the league so that all teams have equal chance to win the Stanley Cup. Leagues like the MLB, where the New York Yankees can just pay up the ass and always be one of the best teams, or even the NBA, where there's no hard cap and teams can just pay a salary or a luxury tax so all the rich teams can sign the best players and stack their team and win championships 4 out of 5 years, whatever it may be. The NHL isn't doing that for a reason. They want it to be a fair league, and it's been great. I love a hard cap. A lot of people don't love it. I love it. I think it makes the NHL great. There's parity in the NHL. It makes it so hard to win the Stanley Cup, but it makes it even for all teams. Unfortunately, it's not even right now the way the taxes are and the way certain provinces and states have to pay more taxes, and therefore players make less money playing there. I really hope the NHL can do something to fix it, because it's definitely not fair for a lot of teams up north and a lot of teams in certain states. Players already have to deal with shitty winners in Winnipeg and Montreal. So with this on top of that, it makes it real fucking hard for us to sign free agents, and that's bullshit, and I don't like it. Radulov, fuck you. No, I'm kidding. It's not his fault. I'm still salty about Phil Danault, too. I think he went to LA for that exact reason. I'm pretty sure the Habs offered him apparently 500K less, so maybe that 500K is different enough for him to want to go to LA, but also that luxury tax makes it way more than a 500K. Now he's making an extra couple million playing in LA. And of course, sunny weather and beaches, but still, this is one of the biggest issues I have, and I really hope the league can address it and fix it somehow, because that's some bullshit. All right, one more thing before we close it off with injuries and I guess one more funny little note that I'm going to end the episode on. But the TSN released their list of their top 20 NHL players this season, and there's a few surprises on there that I got to address. First of all, their top 6 go as follows: Nathan MacKinnon, Connor McDavid, Nikita Kucherov, Austin Matthews, Cale Makar, Quinn Hughes. I don't have any major problems with their top 6. I would put Quinn Hughes over Cale Makar. I still have Quinn Hughes leading the Norris Trophy race, in my opinion. I'd probably put both the D-men above Austin Matthews, although he is on an insane scoring pace. So maybe not. 7, 8, 9, 10. David Pastrnak, Mikko Rantanen, Connor Hellebuck, and Elias Pettersson. Mikko Rantanen is an amazing player and is having a great season. I wouldn't put him above Connor Hellebuck, who's, by the way, one of maybe a Hart Trophy candidate, and Elias Pettersson, who I think is having a better season. Both these guys are the MVPs of their team. Elias Pettersson, you could argue, with Quinn Hughes. But Mikko Rantanen is playing with Nate MacKinnon, who is a man possessed this season. He's playing incredible. I don't want to take anything away from Mikko Rantanen. But for him to be ahead of these guys, and he's ahead of Artemi Panarin, who's all the way down to 13 on that list. I think Panarin, again, being the most valuable player to his team, is having a better season than Mikko Rantanen. He has more goals and more points than Mikko Rantanen, so I don't know how Mikko Rantanen is 5 spots ahead of him. And then, looking down at number 14, we have Leon Draisaitl, who's ahead of guys like Sam Reinhart and William Nylander. Leon Draisaitl, again, an incredible player. He does play with McDavid, who's the best player in the world, not always, but regardless, why is he ahead of Sam Reinhart, and why is he ahead of Nylander? Nylander has 65 points, Sam Reinhart has 64 points, Leon Draisaitl has 60 points. Maybe it's not all about points. What about goals? Sam Reinhart has 39 goals and 21 power play goals. 22 power play goals. Leon Draisaitl has 24 goals and 11 power play goals. I'm just curious to what the reasoning is for putting Leon Draisaitl ahead of Sam Reinhart. Again, this list is based off this year. They said it specifically. This list is based off this year's production. Maybe if you argue overall he's a better player than Sam Reinhart, sure, not going to argue against that. But this year, Sam Reinhart is clearly having a better season. And then the last thing I want to point out is at number 19, we have Jack Hughes. Now, you can argue either way. He's been hurt a lot, so technically, this season he hasn't been the best player because he hasn't played as much as the other guys. But when he has played, I don't know if this counts as the criteria for the list, but when he has played, he is not the 19th best player this season. He's got to be in the top 10, probably in the top 5, because the start of the year he was incredible. When he came back from his injury, still played solid hockey. So just seeing his name at 19 is a bit weird, but I understand he missed a lot of time. So whatever, I'm not going to write an angry letter to TSN for that one. The Draisaitl one is the big one. I do not understand how they have him ahead of Sam Reinhart and William Nylander. And then the last one, I'm probably going to take some heat for this. I actually told Randy to put it up on Instagram to get a vote. Zach Hyman is in the top 20. Now I'll agree. I will agree. This season, Zach Hyman's incredible. Actually, not this season. He's a great player. But the debate that we put on Instagram, I'm sure a lot of you saw, was Zach Hyman over Mark Stone. Because I was talking with my buddy about the Team Canada projection, which, by the way, go check it out on Instagram. Our Puck Drop family released the rosters for the best on best next season, our projection of the rosters. And I had Mark Stone in on Team Canada and not Zach Hyman. And my friend gave me shit for that, saying Zach Hyman is a way better player, battles in the boards a lot more. He's got 30 plus goals on the season. Not taking anything away from Zach Hyman. I personally would still take Mark Stone on my team over Zach Hyman. They're both incredible players, and considering the amazing talent that Canada has up front, maybe you do want a different style player, someone that does battle in the boards. But I think Mark Stone, despite this year, he's kind of playing like shit. In general, he is a gritty guy that can do everything. He hits. He's a great passer, underrated passer actually, underrated shooter as well, and he's usually a Selke guy. Now it's funny because I'm saying this and I don't actually like Mark Stone that much. I always thought he was slightly overrated considering how good people thought this guy was. But I do still think I would take him on my team over Zach Hyman. That said, we took it to Instagram, we made a poll, and it was extremely close. But our voters did choose Zach Hyman slightly ahead of Mark Stone. I think it was like 54% to 46%, something very close. But anyway, so be it. Maybe I'm wrong. Most of the fans disagree with me on Mark Stone over Hyman. Whatever it may be, Hyman is having an incredible year this season, not taking anything away from him. And fuck it, if he could play well with McDavid, throw him on Team Canada. Put them on a line together, and he'll pot all those backdoor tap-ins. Now, before we wrap up, quickly got to point out some more unfortunate incidents. We talked about Mikhail Sergachev and that nasty leg break that he suffered. Well, Philip Cheadle of the New York Rangers, also very unfortunate. He's been battling concussion problems for quite some time, and he suffered another concussion last week, and he is now out for the entire season. A big loss for the New York Rangers. That third line on that team could honestly be a difference maker, pushing them to, one of the best offensive teams in the NHL. Of course, their top two lines are stacked, but that third line of Lafreniere and Kakko and Philip Hedl was really a driving force of their play last year. Now, I know they haven't been playing a lot together this season, especially with Lafreniere making a big jump and Kakko not really fitting in that team well. He's also on the trade block, by the way. I didn't mention that earlier. Regardless, big loss for the Rangers. I feel bad for Philip Cheadle. Concussion problems are the worst. I hope he recovers well, and I hope it doesn't affect him long term. And then also before the All-Star break, the Columbus Blue Jackets announced that rookie sensation Adam Fantilli is to miss 8 weeks. His leg was cut by a skate, an opponent's skate. Just a shitty injury. Thankfully, he's not out for the entire season, but for him to miss over a month, maybe even 2 months, not a good look. That's tough. And now we can officially say that the top 3 draft picks from this past year, Bedard, Leo Carlson, and Adam Fantilli, all missed significant time this season. Now, one more note before we move on to our trivia and close out this episode. Been talking every week, it seems like, about skate blades popping out and just, equipment malfunctions, sticks breaking. But these skate blades, man, it happened to, Ilya Sorokin the other day. For a goalie to lose a skate blade, that sucked. He couldn't slide across. The Winnipeg Jets scored. Well, this week again, Boris Kachuk of the Chicago Blackhawks loses a skate blade. It takes a teammate to push him to the bench. Now both guys are out of the play, and the opposition scores. It was a great goal, by the way. Adam Fox with a wicked pass to Chris Kreider down low. But it's very unfortunate that happened because of an equipment malfunction. Go back to the old school blades. You don't need to pop them out. How often do they actually change the blades on the bench? I could be a complete idiot and realize that they do it all the time. But man, it's affecting play on the ice. Teams are losing games because of this, so they got to sort that out somehow. And that's it for this week. Let's close off with our weekly trivia question. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, subscribe on YouTube. That's all we got so far. But anyway, this week's trivia question. Who has recorded the most points in the NHL as an 18-year-old? So the most points at the age of 18 in the NHL. Who do you got? Make your guesses. Go follow us on Instagram. Wait for the post. It should be up any day now. Comment who you think is the answer. And Caffrey will send a beautiful case of beer your way. Don't forget, if you're living here in South Korea, to go by the CU and 7-Eleven and pick up a case of ice-cold, delicious Caffrey. Because every season is a Caffrey season. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for listening. Not going to take another 2-week break for some time. Don't you worry about it. We will catch you guys next week. I hope you enjoyed the Super Bowl. I hope you enjoyed the week of hockey. We're back in full swing. Let's keep it up. Only a couple weeks left till trade deadline. And only a couple months left until NHL playoffs. The greatest time of the year, baby. We'll catch you guys next week. Take care.